let's get into our opening statements. Mr. Hummel, I'll start with you. Your opening statement, and please include why you're running for this position.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone. Patrick, good to see you this evening. Deschutes County is a special place. In fact, it's the best place in the country to live. We do things differently here. Our leaders are not like the leaders you see in Washington, D.C. Our leaders are us. We see our leaders on our soccer fields, in our churches, and volunteering for nonprofit organizations. And most important of all, we see our leaders working with the community to develop bottom-up solutions to address our problems. I'm that type of leader. If you elect me as your district attorney, I'll be a community leader for public safety. I'll work as part of a team with law enforcement, drug and alcohol counselors, mental health experts, neighborhood associations, and other elected officials to make Deschutes County the safest place in the country to live and raise a family. Now, this is a great place, but there's still work to be done. In regard to mental health, the Deschutes County Jail is the largest mental health provider in the county. Our sheriff and the staff there do great work, but we need to do more to make sure that those who are struggling with mental illness get the help they need, and we can keep our communities safe. In regard to drugs, we need to treat those who will benefit from treatment and punish those who won't, particularly those who deal drugs to our kids. We need consistent application of criminal laws. We can't apply the laws differently based on how well someone is connected. We need to respect taxpayer dollars. We need a district attorney who understands the government's money is the people's money. Too much of our money, in fact, over $1.5 million has been wasted because of mismanagement in the DA's office. And we need to develop innovative crime prevention programs. The best way to keep our communities safe is to prevent crime in the first place. Doing all of this will keep us safer and cost less money. The savings will allow us to devote our limited resources to prosecuting those who deserve it. I'm proud to be endorsed by retired Bend Police Chief Andy Jordan, every mayor in the county, and over 200 other community leaders, and I would be honored to represent you. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty?
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming tonight. 4 years ago, you elected me to remove politics from the district attorney's office and to operate the office in such a way that we were focused on doing justice and ensuring public safety. You did not want your district attorney's office to be used as a political platform. You did not want your district attorney to use the office as a political stepping stone. You wanted your DA focused on justice. And you understood then what I believe you will appreciate now, which is your district attorney needs to be an experienced prosecutor with a proven record as both a leader and a prosecuting attorney in the courtroom. It's been a great honor for me to serve you as your district attorney. I have the privilege, the joy really, of leading 18 prosecutors, 16 deputy DAs and 2 chief deputy DAs, and 28 support staff who are all dedicated, hardworking public servants that have done great work for you since 2011. I've been privileged to work hand in hand with the men and women that wear the uniforms and put their life on the line every day to keep our community safe. And personally, I've been honored to have the opportunity to represent you in the courtroom, prosecuting those who commit crimes in our county, like murder. There's a reason why I've been endorsed by all of my deputy district attorneys, by the Bend Police Officers Association, by the Deschutes County Sheriff's Association, by Oregon Crime Victims United and Oregon Anti-Crime Alliance, and many community leaders. And I'd ask you to pay close attention to all of the endorsements. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Flaherty, since Mr. Hummel took the opening statement first, you will be the first to get the first question. And it is, what do you think are the greatest challenges facing the district attorney today?
I think the greatest challenges facing us today involve drugs, specifically methamphetamine. I have the opportunity to work with 2 grand juries every month. So that's 2 7-person grand juries, and I spend time with them on cases and also debriefing with them at the end of their term. And I always ask them the question, what do you believe to be the number one crime problem in Deschutes County? And the answer, since I was a deputy DA for you back in 1992, is methamphetamine. So that is certainly one of the challenges, Christy, that we face. We need to expand our drug court. We have a great drug court in operation right now, but it's limited in its for individuals that have Department of Human Services involvement in their life. We need to establish a veterans treatment court in Deschutes County because it's the right thing to do and it's a cost-effective way to deal with a certain population that we see increasing here over time. But I believe that the greatest challenge is addressing the methamphetamine problem in Deschutes County and perhaps just continuing to do the great work that we've done over the last 3.5 years with the resources that we have, because resources are limited and the workload continues to rise.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, to you, what do you think are the greatest challenges facing the district attorney today?
The greatest challenge in the DA's office is the failure of leadership from our current district attorney. His mismanagement has cost the taxpayers over $1.5 million. Think of what we could do in this state with $1.5 million additional to devote to public safety. What are the problems we have? Redmond, many people don't know this. If you live in Redmond, you probably do. Redmond has one of the highest theft rates for cities its size in the state. Where's been the sense of urgency from our district attorney on that? Where's been the call from action? It's been missing. We have a drug and mental health crisis in this county. As I mentioned, the Deschutes County Jail is the largest mental health provider in the county. The sheriff and his staff do wonderful work, but we need to do more to help those who are suffering from mental illness so they can live a life that they and their family want them to live, and we can keep the community safe. We need to enhance our drug treatment programs. We have a family drug court program that is wonderful, but only people with families, kids, are allowed into that program. We need to have a drug court program for everyone. And we need a veterans court. Patrick and I agree that we need it, but he's not been able to deliver it because of his failed leadership. We need a district attorney who works with the community to develop solutions to our problems. We're a great place to live. We're the greatest place in the country to live, but we've got work to do, and I'm ready to get to work.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, this next question will come first to you. What role should the should the district attorney's office play in prosecuting juvenile crime cases in regard to balancing victims' rights and the welfare of the juvenile offender?
Thanks for the question. Absolutely, the district attorney's office is the office in charge of making sure our youth are don't go off the rails and into a life of crime. Juvenile court is it serves two purposes, right? If you are a kid, you are getting off track, you're making bad decisions, you could go one of two ways. You could end up being a productive member of society who goes into the military or college and gets a great job, or one more bad decision, you could be in a life of crime. And we need to make a call as a court system, as a community, as a prosecutor's office. How are we going to help this kid make the right decision? So we need a juvenile justice system that gets our kids on the right track. Now, there could be a time, and there are times, unfortunately, when the most heinous of crimes that happen, no matter how much we help a kid. So you have to make that difficult judgment call. Are we going to treat this kid? Are we going to try to help him? Or at some point, you will have to go to punishment. My philosophy in my core is that kids are the future. We have to do everything we can to make sure our kids get the help they need so they're going to be productive members of society. So my bias is to help kids get there early with innovative crime prevention programs and youth intervention programs so we don't have to make these difficult decisions after the fact.
Mr. Flaherty, what role should the district attorney's office play in prosecuting juvenile crime cases in regard to balancing victims' rights and the welfare of the juvenile offender?
Thank you. And Oregon law dictates what the district attorney's role is with regard to juvenile justice. And so as district attorney, I'm required to prosecute juvenile delinquency cases and also to represent the state in dependency cases. A an important part of that is the work that we do with the Juvenile Justice Department, Deschutes County Juvenile Justice. There are many preventative measures that are taken, or prevention programs that are operated through Deschutes County Juvenile Justice. I, as your DA, have dedicated 2 prosecutors to the juvenile division, one of whom has at least 10 years or so under his belt. So I certainly care deeply about our youth. At the same time, and it's not occurred, thankfully, in my administration yet, at the same time, juveniles may commit Measure 11 offenses. I have the experience required to exercise prosecutorial discretion, make the right call about whether to take a juvenile in as an adult, treat them as an adult. As I said, that's not occurred yet, and I hope that we never have a case like that in Deschutes County, but I'm prepared to exercise Measure 11 as required.
Thank you, and Mr. Flaherty, this is first to you. What do you think is, or would be, the most difficult type of crime to prosecute?
Oh boy. The most difficult type of crime to prosecute is a crime where you do not have a confession, you do not have forensic evidence, that is, you do not have DNA or blood evidence, no fingerprints, and where you're required to rely solely upon circumstantial evidence. And so, at least in my experience, the most challenging case that I've prosecuted was a no-body murder case, where we had to rely on this proof of motive, proof of opportunity. We did not have the victim's body, we did not have any blood evidence. The best piece of evidence we had was a letter that was anonymous that we were able to prove through expert testimony, experts from the FBI and from a university in California, that the defendant was the author of that letter. But child abuse cases tend to take the greatest toll and be the most challenging for us, just because of the damage to the child, the human suffering that prosecutors have to deal with. And so they really become, in my experience, and I think I'm speaking for the 18 prosecutors that work with me, they become the most difficult cases to work with, to prosecute.
Thank you, and Mr. Hummel, what do you think is or would be the most difficult type of crime to prosecute?
The question's very precise, most difficult, and there are so many difficult ones, and Patrick's mentioned certainly a few of them, but if I had to pick the most difficult, which I do, because that's the question, I would say domestic violence would be the most difficult. Such an awful situation that the survivors of domestic violence face. They love the person who is hurting them. They need to get away, and they choose to get away, but then their whole life is in that house. They might have kids in that house, they might have lived in that house for 20 years. The person who's abusing them might be the only person who has supported them financially, and the woman has a difficult, awful decision to make. Does she go back to that abuser, or does she leave? And she often changes her mind, which, as you understand domestic violence, you can appreciate why she does that. So the woman at one point wants to prosecute, at the next point chooses not to, and then chooses to prosecute again because the guy might beat her and then love her and then give her money, and then he beats her again. And it's a vicious cycle, and it's extremely hard for a prosecutor, defense attorney, the woman involved, the family. I volunteered my services helping women obtain restraining orders in court, and I have a deep understanding of domestic violence, and I would say that's the most difficult, but there are many difficult crimes.
Thank you, and Mr. Hummel, this is first to you. How would you, or do you, determine which cases to take to trial and which cases to plea bargain? And the second part, what are or would be your criteria for offering a plea bargain? Sure.
Plea bargaining is a necessary evil. If every case went to trial, it would take 10 years, 8 years to get all cases to trial. About 93% of cases resolve in plea offers. And if the defense attorney and the defendant and the prosecutor all agree on a proper resolution of the case, it's efficient use of taxpayer dollars to do that. But when you're making that decision as a prosecutor, how do you resolve these cases? You have to ask yourself a few things. You have to ask yourself, what can I prove in court? If you have a difficult case, you'd be more willing to plea bargain. You have to ask yourself, what plea offers have I offered similar people in similar circumstances? Because it's a very powerful position for a prosecutor to have, to offer plea offers. If you treat people unfairly, if there's a well-connected person such as Brett Beescheid, a Les Schwab executive who killed a man and ended up serving 55 days in jail because of a plea offer he was given, and then a less well-connected person gets a one-year sentence in a very similar case, that's not justice. If we lose faith in our justice system, if we lose faith in the fact that a district attorney is going to dispatch justice even-handedly and fairly, we're going down a wrong path. So a lot of factors to consider, but the number one is you have to make sure you treat all similarly situated defendants equally.
And Mr. Flaherty, how would you or do you determine which cases to take to trial and which cases to plea bargain? And what are or would be your criteria for offering a plea bargain?
Okay, thank you. Well, first, we don't charge cases in my office unless we answer 3 questions, yes. The first question is, do we have admissible evidence that would prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty? And that's not what the law requires. We can file charges if we just have a good faith belief or probable cause to believe that a person's committed a crime, but that's the standard that we operate by. The second question, of course, is it the right thing to do? Is it just? And the third question, which we never get to when it involves child sex abuse cases, for example, or murder, is do we have the resources available to prosecute the case? So once we make the charging decision then, Oregon law actually sets out criteria, you can find it in ORS 135-415, that DAs should take into consideration. We look at whether the defendant has any criminal history. Has he or she committed a similar offense? Has the defendant shown a willingness to accept responsibility for their conduct? Will the rapid application of justice in a particular case enable us to resolve other cases more quickly? And there are other factors depending on the unique facts of the case. We have never made a decision based on someone's connection. I give you my word on that.
Okay. And Mr. Flaherty, to you again, what do you consider your greatest strengths and weaknesses?
My greatest strengths and weaknesses, I think one of my greatest strengths is leadership. That is why I have the support of all of my deputy district attorneys and the law enforcement associations. I'm very committed, that's another strength I have, I'm committed to the constitutional functions of the district attorney without regard to politics or whether somebody's connected well or not. I believe that one of my weaknesses is that I haven't developed a good relationship with media. I think. No, that's improving, isn't it, Shelby? I believe that is improving, and that is, I don't say that lightly because I do need to improve in that area. My office has done outstanding work, and it's been my failure to communicate better or have a better relationship with the media that's led to the media not maybe covering a lot of the work that we've done as thoroughly as the media might otherwise have covered it. And that's something that I'm working to correct. I think that sums it up pretty good.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, what do you consider your greatest strengths and weaknesses?
Thanks. My greatest strength is my community leadership skills. I don't view myself as the guy who's going to make all the decisions. I view myself as a person who can bring us all together to come up with the solutions. In this room and out in this county, we've got experts in drug and alcohol treatment, mental health treatment, law enforcement. We have rich resources in Deschutes County. We're blessed with the resources we have here. But think of all the great programs we have: Saving Grace, Kids Center, Deschutes County Mental Health, drug and alcohol treatment programs, all the great law enforcement agencies. Everyone is doing great work in regard to crime prevention, but I think this. I think if we brought together all the crime prevention components in the community, we'd see some duplication of services, and we'd probably see some gaps. But where's the leadership been to bring people together and look at this as a whole? We do a lot on our own, and we do a lot of mini collaborations. But the entire county, for a year or so, doing a major look at coordinating our crime prevention programs, I'm the type of leader who can do that. That's my strength, and that's what I want to bring to the office. My greatest weakness, that's always the worst interview question, right? Do you set yourself up if you get an answer? But I think I can take things personally. These campaigns, I can just speak for this campaign. Every day I read something in the paper, I'm like, oh, it hurts. And so I take things personally, and it may take me a day to shake it off a little. So I'd say that's my greatest weakness.
Thank you. And we now have some audience questions. You had both mentioned the need for a veterans court. And one of our audience members would like to know, and this is first to you, Mr. Hummel, how are you qualified to address the needs and difficult situations that veterans face should our county implement a veterans court?
Thanks for the question. I was involved, a key player in the creation of Central Oregon's first specialty court in the late 1990s. The Crook County Drug Court was created. And you create these specialty courts, no one person does it. And in Crook County, how we did it, it was Judge Gary Thompson, myself, prosecutor's office, police department, drug and alcohol counselors, people from housing community in Crook County. We all came together and planned for a year. And then we went down to Sacramento, which had there weren't many drug courts back then. So we went down to Sacramento, which had a great drug court program. We learned from them, we developed a funding strategy together, and we achieved that court. And so here with our Veterans Court, look, there are struggles and hurdles and challenges, but working together as a team, we can achieve the Veterans Court. What I say, people tell me sometimes when a solution involves money, well, shoot, everything involves money, right? There's no money, there's no money. Think about this, think about 10 years ago when this community came up with an idea, right? This crazy idea that we were gonna have a 4-year university here. How many naysayers were there? Oh, you can't afford it, Salem will never give you the money, no way. Well, we came together as a community and had a vision and worked, hundreds of people working together. And we went to Salem, we got the funding, dirt is being turned, and we're gonna have the first class coming in. So don't tell me we can't do it working together as a community.
Thank you. And Mr. Flaherty, how are you qualified to address the needs and difficult situations that veterans face, and should our county implement a veterans court?
Thank you. So I'm qualified because I'm an experienced prosecutor, and I've been working in the criminal justice system for 25 years, 22 of those years right here in Deschutes County, where we have about 16,000 veterans. I've also worked since 2010 with many veterans groups here in Deschutes County and with others in an effort to create a veterans treatment court or to establish a court, or when we couldn't do that, to put in place an intervention strategy within the DA's office to take care of those that have served our country. So I have worked with COVO, Central Oregon Veterans Outreach, the Central Oregon Vet Center, many individual veterans, the sheriff, who is, as you know, pretty creative when it comes to finding financial solutions to things, judges, others out in the community, all of whom support Veterans Treatment Court. And it will take the kind of leadership that I have provided, which is why I have support from the law enforcement associations. But it will take more than that. It really will take the bench, and I'd encourage any of you to talk to a judge if you have a question about this. It will take our judges to convince the powers that be in Salem that we need another judge here in Deschutes County, and I believe that that's going to happen in 2015. That's something I've been supporting as best I can too.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. Another question from the audience. This audience member has a question regarding marijuana dispensaries. They're asking, compared to meth, what is the priority for pursuit and punishment of growers who break the law?
So that's a good question. Growers that have an Oregon medical marijuana card and are operating in compliance with the law have never been prosecuted in Deschutes County and will not be on my watch. If the question is relating to those who are growing outside of the law, that's different, though. We haven't had cases come forward, really, where we've questioned the medical marijuana grower, if they're properly registered. I think the more important question is, what are we going to do to regulate marijuana if it's legalized? I oppose the legalization of marijuana because I do not want to see access go up any more than it already is with the Medical Marijuana Act. It will have a negative effect on our children, to put it mildly. As your DA, I'll see more DUIs, marijuana cases, which means we'll have more DUI, vehicular assaults, and homicides. That's what Colorado and Washington are experiencing, and it will be very expensive to prosecute those cases. It will require the legislature to enact laws that will allow us to use forensic evidence in those cases, whether it's urine or blood. And I believe we should wait and let the social experiment play out in Colorado and Washington before we go any further.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, again regarding marijuana dispensaries, compared to meth, what is the priority for pursuit and punishment of growers who break the law?
A district attorney doesn't make the law. A district attorney enforces the law. When I'm your district attorney, I'll enforce the law. If there are medical marijuana growers in this community who are violating the law, they will be prosecuted. People doing meth are going to be prosecuted. I don't make the law. Everyone here, me included, every deputy district attorney, every DA has personal feelings about the law, of course. You know where my personal feelings go, though? They go on the threshold of the doorway to the DA's office. When I walk in that door, my personal feelings are left behind, and I'm prosecuting the law. This community and this state might have an opportunity in November to vote on whether we want to legalize marijuana. Whatever we decide, that's what my office and I will enforce. If marijuana is legal, it's legal. If it's not legal, we're going to prosecute people who are violating the law. So I appreciate the question about priorities. The priority for my office will be prosecuting people who violate the law and not wasting time getting involved in advocating for what the law should or should not be.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, another question from the audience to you first. How can you assure the public that individuals with more money will face the same justice in court that individuals with less money will have?
I can assure you it by telling you that's a priority of mine. I've been very troubled by the Deschutes case. I've shared this before and I'm going to share it again. We had 3 vehicular homicides in the last few years that were similar. 2 involved medical conditions. One person who had a vision problem, one person who had a diabetic situation, and one person who had been drinking. The vision and diabetic people, one person got a year in jail, one person got 6 or 9 months, and Mr. Deschutes, Les Schwab executive, the one who'd been drinking, the one who the grand jury charged with criminally negligent homicide, my opponent dismissed the charge of criminally negligent homicide, agreed to a deal where this person pled guilty to hit and run, and the person ended up serving 55 days in jail. That will not happen in my office. I've seen what happens in other countries when people lose respect and trust in their criminal justice system. It's not good, and it's not going to happen under my watch.
Thank you. And Mr. Flaherty, how can you assure the public that individuals with more money will face the same justice in court that individuals with less money will have?
Well, I would ask everyone just to look at the record, or again, talk with a judge if you know a judge, talk to a police officer, talk to one of my staff, or go to our website. I'll put up some information on the Deschutes case because my opponent here wants to keep bringing it up. First of all, no one is treated differently because of their financial background. I prosecuted a case, some of you may know, the State versus Bray, very wealthy anesthesiologist, and represented actually by the same defense attorney, very well-known defense attorney from Portland. And any of you that are familiar with that case know what happened there. Justice was done, that case went to trial. He was found guilty, he's serving a 25-year mandatory minimum for rape in the first degree and other charges. Beachside, and this is something that Mr. Hummel just doesn't understand because he's never been a prosecutor before. The Beachside case was different than any other vehicular homicide case, and that's the state of truism because every case is unique. Every human being is unique, the facts of every case are unique, but in this case, there were settlement conferences, there were 2 different judges that sentenced the case. Criminally negligent homicide is the same level of offense as felony hit and run when a person is killed. It would have been unjust to go forward with the criminally negligent homicide charge because the evidence wasn't there and it wouldn't have made any difference if we did. It was up to the judge.
And I hate to cut you off, but you will get a chance to answer this next question from an audience member. They would like you to identify the mandatory arrest crimes in Oregon and state your position on mandatory arrest for these vastly different offenses.
So there are several, and there's an outlier or 2 in there as well. For example, I believe that there is a animal abuse, not each animal abuse crime, but animal abuse is one that I'd call a little bit of an outlier. Anytime that there is a violation of a restraining order, stalking order, the police are required to make an arrest. Anytime the police go out and investigate a domestic violence incident and determine that an assault in the 4th degree or greater degree, or a more serious assault has occurred between family members, as that's defined under the law, the police are required to make an arrest. So the mandatory arrest questions that we get most frequently in the DA's office when we're on call involve stalking orders, restraining orders, the level of proof. What do we do if it appears that both parties are equally culpable? Are we required to make a decision? And there's some argument there in terms of how the law is interpreted, but as a general rule, in any kind of domestic violence case, whether it's stalking order, restraining order, or assault, menacing, strangulation, the police are mandated to make an arrest.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, can you identify the mandatory arrest crimes in Oregon and state your position on mandatory arrest for these vastly different offenses?
Well, we just heard the litany of mandatory arrests. The community decides what the law is. The community's decided through our elected representatives that certain crimes an officer has to arrest someone for. And domestic violence related crimes are the most prevalent when there's actually a domestic violence crime that occurs, or stalking or restraining order violation, as Mr. Flaherty has spoken to you about. I support those laws, but even if I didn't, I'm not the one who will be enforcing mandatory arrest. This is important to know. Law enforcement supports mandatory arrest. So law enforcement officer at 3 in the morning comes upon a crime scene. The officer has to know, to learn, see what he's dealing with, determine what crime has been committed, and then know whether that crime is one where an arrest is required. And so the law enforcement officer makes that arrest, and then when it comes to the DA's office, the arrest has already occurred. So a district attorney is not involved in the mandatory arrest components, but certainly involved in the domestic violence prosecution that follows. And as I mentioned earlier, that's a particular a passion of mine, helping women who are survivors of domestic violence.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, this audience question will come to you first. If elected, what will you do to prevent tax dollars from being used to pay former district attorney employees who might believe they have been wrongfully terminated?
Correct. Yeah, this is a passion of mine, no doubt. Over $1.5 million has been wasted because of my opponent's poor management. If you run a business and you want to come in with a tough guy attitude and fire everyone because that's just the way you lead, and then you get sued and your business loses money, fine, that's your business. But when you're a steward of taxpayer dollars, when you are an elected official, you can't come in running a rough shot, firing everyone left and right because you're the new sheriff in town. Because you know what? When you get sued, which we did, and when you lose, which we did, who's paying it? You're not paying it, we're paying it. The taxpayer, the government's money is the taxpayer's money. And I'll be a leader who understands that. Look, if there's someone who's not performing well in my office, I'm gonna bring them in, I'm gonna say, look, I'm seeing some problems here. How can I help you succeed? Because I want my staff to succeed. We'll work on it, we'll come up with a plan. You know, a few months later, if they're still slipping, I'll say, look, I see you're still slipping, how can I help you? If we get to a point where it's not working out, I'm not gonna be reluctant to let someone go. But if I do it, they may fire me, absolutely. You know what? They'll lose, because I would have done it the right way. I have executive management experience. I know how to hire, I know how to fire. I fired before, and there's never been a successful lawsuit against me. Actually, there hasn't been a lawsuit against me for firing someone. But if we get sued, we're gonna win, because I'm gonna respect the taxpayer dollars, and I'm gonna respect my employees, and if I have to let someone go, I'm gonna do it properly.
Thank you. And Mr. Flaherty, if reelected, what will you do to prevent tax dollars from being used to pay former district attorney employees who might believe they have been wrongfully terminated?
So it's important to understand a couple of things. First of all, when a district attorney is sued, the district attorney, and this would be true even if Mr. Hummel is elected, the district attorney has no control over the litigation whatsoever. It is the Department of Administrative Services, the state insurance company basically, that comes in, much like if you're an offender bender, your car's damaged, you may believe that the other party's at fault, but your insurance company will come in and settle that case about 99 times out of 100. There were 3 deputy DAs that filed lawsuits, and it's a misrepresentation, and I'd ask when you're out doing your research and deciding for whom to vote that you really pay attention to a lot of the misrepresentations that my opponent has made from day one. 3 deputy district attorneys that needed to leave, believe they were entitled to their government job and filed lawsuits. Now, one of those deputy DAs, under my predecessor, caused 5 young women to leave the office. I could not appoint her. The state actually paid $125,000 to the last one that was run out of the office. One of them lied during an internal investigation and was terminated. I can't appoint someone like that, neither would you. Deputy DAs have the same power and function that the elected district attorney has. So when you're elected as a DA, you have an obligation to voters to make sure that those deputy DAs will carry out the voters' will.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty, and this is first to you, and it's in the same vein. Another audience member would like to know, should the district attorney, who is elected by the people, have the right and responsibility to hire and fire the best people to assist him or her on the job? She says that is what we have elected him to do.
Yes, it is a short answer to that, because otherwise there is no point in the election if the newly elected district attorney has to carry out the voters' will with his or her predecessor deputy DAs. You elected me to get politics out of the DA's office. Something that many don't know is there were many deputy district attorneys that did not want to work with the 3 deputy DAs that filed the lawsuits, and the chemistry in the office was horrible, in large part because of those 3 deputy DAs. And if you're elected to carry out the functions of the DA, you need to put together a team that is unified and that you can trust to carry out the legal obligations that you have to the voters. I did that. If you look at the record, and that's what I encourage you to do, because that should be the metric here, is how has the district attorney's office performed? And what you will find is that my team has had unprecedented success. We have created efficiencies that never existed before, and that is undisputed. And that should be the measure when you make a decision about for whom to vote. I've got a great team in place right now, and it's been in place for
The leader you get with me. My first day in office as a DA, I'm going to talk to my team and say this. Yesterday was an election. Today's the first day we're working together. Now let's get to work. Let's create a vision for this office together. Let's create that vision. And then after we do that, I'm gonna meet with each employee individually, and I'm gonna say, what are your goals? We created our office vision. What are your individual goals? And I'll tell them my goals, and then we'll work to create a vision and a plan for each individual employee. And we're gonna work hard going forward, and as I mentioned before, if I see someone struggling, I'm gonna sit down with them and say, how can I help you succeed? One, because I care about them as a person. Two, because I'm respectful of taxpayer dollars. We have people who are working to keep us all safe. I have to be able to help them succeed, to keep us safe. And if something doesn't work out, after bending over backwards to respect taxpayer dollars and making sure that person is treated as a human with respect, if it doesn't work out, I'll have no problem letting someone go. And then if they sue me, they'll lose, because I would have done it the right way. My opponent has said that he was right. He said everyone who sued him was lying. He said the state shouldn't have settled. They're just ridiculous. They were wrong. It's never his fault. It's never his fault. And you know what he said? He said he would do it again. He would do it again because he was right. Everyone was lying. Everyone was wrong. I would do it again. Your tax dollars are at risk with leadership like that.
And Mr. Hummel, another audience question first to you. Often violent crime offenders are arrested and then released right away with a later court date. This audience member would like to know, why aren't they held in jail when they are clearly a danger to society, especially to the victim?
Yeah, this is a huge problem for the community. There's a short answer, a mid-range answer, and an answer we can talk about for weeks. But the short answer is jail capacity. There is oftentimes not enough beds in the jail to hold these violent people. And now the longer answer is, we can do a few things. One, we can spend a heck of a lot of money to quadruple the size of the jail. It's getting bigger, so that's good. But we need to spend a heck of a lot more to have enough beds if we're going to continue to do law enforcement the way we've always done it. So one, that's too much money to do it that way. I'd like to work together with the community to develop some innovative crime prevention programs, drug and alcohol programs, mental health programs, expand on the good ones we already have, because that's going to get the people out of the jail, and it's going to get their addictions under control. It's going to get their mental health issues under control. So we have the jail beds for these violent people who are being put out on the street now because we're not doing things the right way. And this is not a criticism of the sheriff or his deputies at the jail. Absolutely not. If there are no beds, there are no beds. But we need a top-down leadership to do things differently so there are the beds when people do commit these crimes. Because I want a bed for someone who's earned a bed. They're going to stay there when they've earned it, but they can't stay there if there's not enough beds.
And Mr. Flaherty, often violent crime offenders are arrested and then released right away with a later court date. Why aren't they held in jail when they are clearly a danger to society, especially to the victim?
Yes, and I can say, because we keep a close eye on each day on those that are brought into custody. In fact, that's the first thing that we do every morning, is we look at those that were brought into custody the night before, as we go about the process of deciding who to charge and what crimes to issue and so forth. And I can tell you that, for the most part, the violent offenders are not getting just booked and released. Those that are, though, and if they are, it is a question of jail capacity primarily, and of course that's something that our sheriff and the community is addressing right now. For those of you, if you haven't seen the construction going on out there, it's moving along very, very efficiently, and we'll have about 144 new beds here within a few months. So it's really important, I think, to understand the role of the district attorney under the Constitution and Oregon law. Some relationship between the drug issues and violent crime, but it's not as tight as has been implied.
Thank you. And Mr. Flaherty, this next question from the audience is for you, kind of a lengthy one. We now have at least 2 facilities in our community that house people who are struggling with mental illness and addiction. Recently, we've learned that the BSRP, Psychiatric Review Board, patients will live in these neighborhood facilities. These are people who have been found culpable of violent crimes but not found guilty by reason of insanity when released to the community for treatment. Should the local neighborhood be notified of their presence?
Well, that's an easy one, yes. I believe they should be. I could talk about that, use up a little more time here, and say that that is one of many cost-shifting actions that's been taken by the state that is really impacting us here locally. I see Scott Johnson in the audience back here. He could certainly talk for a long time about the impact that closing down the state hospitals had on Deschutes County mental health facilities. And that is a gap that we identified in our community a couple of years ago when a number of law enforcement agencies in St. Charles and Kids Center and Deschutes County Behavioral Health all came together to analyze how we might address mental health issues here in Deschutes County more effectively. And one of the gaps that was identified during that Sanchez study was that we need to have some form of residential mental health treatment facility. A halfway house model is believed to be a good one too for those that may have criminal justice involvement, but at a low level, maybe they're in a mental health court, and if we could put them in a residential treatment facility, that instead of having them in jail, we'd all be better off.
Thank you. Mr. Hummel, I'll read through it quickly.
Sure.
We now have at least 2 facilities in our community that house people struggling with mental illness and addiction. Recently, we've learned that PSRB, Psychiatric Review Board patients, will live in these neighborhood facilities. These are people who have been found culpable of violent crimes but found not guilty by reason of insanity. When
We have a terrible decision to make. Do I call 911, in which case my loved one is going to go to jail? Or do I not call, in which case he could hurt himself or others? That's an awful situation to be put in, and there are family members who have to deal with that every day. NAMI board told me that some communities have developed a intermediate step where the family member can take their loved one to a crisis center that's staffed by mental health professionals who are trained in just this situation, to try to get someone stabilized, get them calmed down. They can hold them for 24 hours, not beyond 24 hours. There's constitutional issues involved there. But according to NAMI, it's worked really well in many communities, because you know what happens? If you don't have that, family member calls too often, in which case the jail is treating the mental illness, or they don't call, in which case the person might hurt themselves or others. So having this option leads to family members using that option more, which frees up beds in the jail and keeps the community safer. Programs like that are what I'm interested in.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, this next audience question is first to you. Do you support and agree with Jessica's law? And when, if ever, would you take a case outside Jessica's law?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Jessica's law, as some of you may not know, it's Measure 11, mandatory minimum sentences for child sex abuse charges. Again, you are not going to see me shedding a tear for anyone who commits child sex abuse. We need to be harsh. We need to prosecute those as aggressively as possible. That's the law. My office will enforce it. You know, this might be an easy question to say, do I support the law? You know, I'm half inclined to say yes, but my philosophy on this is my personal opinion on any law is irrelevant. There are laws I agree with. There are laws I disagree with. It does not matter. My personal opinion when I walk in that door of the DA's office is left behind. So any individual law, do I agree with it or not, is irrelevant. I will tell you, my office will aggressively prosecute child sex abuse, and will not let up on the gas on that. There is no room for any of these drug, alcohol, mental health programs I talked about for child sex abusers. okay? No, that's where you aggressively prosecute as hard as you can. If we implement the programs I'm talking about, drug, alcohol, mental health, if we do more of that, that's gonna free up resources so we can put our limited resources, drop the full weight of our limited resources on people who are committing child sex abuse and crimes like that.
Mr. Flaherty, do you support and agree with Jessica's law? And when, if ever, would you take a case outside Jessica's law?
I do certainly support Jessica's law, and I've prosecuted cases involving the rape, sodomy, unlawful sexual penetration of children under 12. My opponent has repeatedly stated that, well, my personal opinion doesn't matter from the DA, I won't be legislating from the office. And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that what our personal beliefs are with respect to public safety measures is very important for you to know. Because of the concept of prosecutorial discretion, every day prosecutors make a decision whether or not to file a charge, whether to take a case Measure 11 or not Measure 11, whether to pursue the death penalty when a police officer is murdered on the line of duty or not, every day. And so if you don't know what our personal beliefs are about public safety measures, you're in the dark. My opponent lobbied against Jessica's law. Jessica's law requires a 25-year mandatory minimum sentence for someone who commits a first-degree sex offense against a child under 12. My opponent doesn't support Measure 11 that provides mandatory minimum sentences for many offenses, from murder to down to kidnapping and using a child in a sexually explicit display. I voted for Measure 11, and I've successfully prosecuted many of those cases.
And as a follow-up, and this will be first to you, Mr. Flaherty, should the threat of being charged with a Measure 11 offense be used as a bargaining tool?
Never. Never. And in fact, when you elected me 4 years ago, that was a deep concern that you had, and that goes back to what I said about how the district attorney exercises prosecutorial discretion. Under my predecessor's administration, and in fact by the very deputy DAs that I refused to appoint, Measure 11 was used to leverage plea deals. That has not happened on my watch and will not happen on my watch. We carefully screen every case before we make a charging decision, but Measure 11 cases go through a strict scrutiny within the office to make sure that we're using our resources wisely, that we're accomplishing justice. But I can tell you when it involves children, whether they're under 12 or just children under 18, those are cases that if they're Measure 11 cases, they're going to be charged with a Measure 11 offense. Those are what we call no-brainers.
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, should the threat of being charged with a Measure 11 offense be used as a bargaining tool?
Absolutely not. Prosecutor and or the grand jury should decide what crime or crimes someone committed, and then charge that person with those crimes, and then you can start plea negotiations. Absolutely, it'd be completely inappropriate to hold a charge back and then go to someone and say, plead guilty or we're gonna drop this charge on you. Absolutely not. As we touched on earlier, you know, some of these questions overlap a bit, but as we touched on earlier, when you're deciding what plea offer to extend to a defendant, there's a lot of factors. No.
Mr. Hummel, this
Office, but also with the community. Okay, this is what I talked about earlier. With crime prevention programs, it's proven, time-tested, that crime prevention programs cost less money and keep communities safer. But you do need to front load some money. So coming up with that initial money to start the program, that's the heavy lift. But if you can succeed there, you're going to save money in the long term, and we're gonna keep the community safer. But you have to be the type of leader who can bring people together to do it. So that's what you should be advocating on, not advocating on what should be a law and what should not be a law.
And Mr. Flaherty, how active should a district attorney be in speaking out about political issues, legislation, ballot measures, et cetera, that would affect public safety in Deschutes County?
So I think if, for example, in the last full session, House Bill 3194 in its original version would have undermined Measure 11, would have taken sex abuse in the first degree out of Measure 11. It would have gone from a 75-month mandatory minimum to a 16 to 18-month presumptive sentence, which, as in the cases that my opponent mentioned earlier, the judge would have discretion to impose a downward departure to a jail sentence if the judge chose to. And so when it comes to a public safety measure that directly affects us, then I believe it's appropriate for a district attorney, consistent with his or her other obligations, and that depends on the dynamic environment, what's occurring in the moment in the DA's office, to speak out. I did that fairly softly on 3194, but I made my views known locally to the media at our local public safety coordinating committee meetings, and at Coles, a meeting that I attend every month, Central Oregon Law Enforcement Services, where all the sheriffs and law enforcement chiefs and FBI and DEA get together once a month to discuss philosophical issues and practical problems that we're facing with resources that my opponent's referring to and so forth. The law, the first would be my father, who was a mill worker, but taught me the critical importance of always being honest and never quitting. And those are two qualities that a district attorney needs and any good lawyer needs. Certainly my wife, Valerie, has influenced my practice tremendously. First as watching her in the courtroom, as chief deputy when she prosecuted all the child abuse cases in Lincoln County where we first started out. She has been an inspiration because of the qualities that she has as a human being and a lawyer. Always tell the truth, know the law, respect everyone in the courtroom and out. I clerked for a judge when I started out that had some impact too, because to watch defense attorneys and prosecutors go at it, and he would critique them and say, "Patrick, don't ever do that," or
Thank you. And Mr. Hummel, can you point to one or two people who have most influenced your approach to the law, and what has been their contribution to how you practice?
Certainly, Cook County Judge Gary Thompson was and is a mentor to me. When I was a young attorney, I practiced a lot in Cook County, and Judge Thompson had a deep respect and appreciation for Native American culture, and I remember many conversations that Judge Thompson and I would have about the value of family in the Native American culture, and how family can be there for people who are in trouble or need, and can be a sense of comfort. And that he was always keenly aware of that, and always shared that with me, and that stuck with me. And Terry Ramsdorf, attorney that I worked for here for 6 years, I remember one particular case. I was representing a child in a neglect case. The mother had been neglectful of the child, was a drug addict, often wasn't home, wasn't caring properly for the child, and I had to advocate for the child. And I quickly made a decision that I was going to advocate that child be removed from the home and the child go into foster care. And I was a young attorney, and I sat down with Terry and we had a long talk about it, and he said, "John, You're the attorney on this case, you're gonna make the decision, but never underestimate the bond between a mother and a daughter. And look very carefully at this. And I looked at it again, I gave it more time, I rethought my position, and a year later, I'll never forget the photo I got from the family, the child in the mom's arms, and they're still together today, 10 years later, and never underestimate the bond between a mother and a child. That sticks with me.
And I hate to cut you off, but we have to have time for our final question, and this is to you first, Mr. Hummel. Who is supporting you?
I'm proud of the support I have in this community. When I decided to run, 7 or 8 months ago or so now, I knew that this would be the district attorney for Deschutes County, not the district attorney for Bend. I was a Bend city councilor. I'm proud to have support in Bend, but I knew that if I was going to serve effectively, I had to have support, and I had to represent people throughout this county. I cold called about 60 people in Lapine and Redmond, Terrebonne Sisters, asked if I could sit down, have coffee with them, pick their brain, get their input on what the important public safety issues were for their community. Everyone said yes. Had about 60 wonderful conversations, and the vast majority of those people are endorsing me. I have over 200 endorsements from business leaders, nonprofit leaders, community leaders, retired folks. I have retired Bend Police Chief Andy Jordan. I have retired Oregon State Police troopers. I have a sitting district attorney. Every mayor in the county is endorsing me, and I'm proud of that. You know why I'm proud of that? Because these aren't people that, most of them aren't people who were, just my best friends. Many of them are people who I didn't know and I got to know. Many of them are people who respected my work on the city council. All of them are people I respect, and I think all of us in this community respect. So I'm proud of the over 200 community leaders that support me, including every mayor in the county.
Thank you. And Mr. Flaherty, who is supporting you?
First, as I mentioned earlier, my deputy district attorneys, the Deschutes County District Attorneys Association, which is the union you've heard referenced. There are 16 deputy DAs, my 2 chief deputy district attorneys. The Bend Police Officers Association, the Deschutes Sheriff's Association, which are the deputy sheriffs. I'm endorsed by the Crime Victims United of Oregon, the Oregon Anti-Crime Alliance. I'm endorsed also by members of our community that some of you know, community leaders like Kathy Eckman, former mayor of Bend and longtime city councilor. Troy Reinhardt, Jack Holt, a couple of businessmen who are well known here. Peter Carlson, Carlson Sign Company. Jock DeKalb is a longtime trial lawyer in criminal law, doing defense work. He was originally an elected district attorney. I shouldn't say originally, he was a deputy DA and an elected DA. He's been doing criminal defense. He told me he's getting ready for, I think, his 39th murder trial when I go to trial with him on a murder case in July. And he knows me well. There are many others in the community that are supporting me officially. And I think it is important to pay attention to what experience do those individuals have in the criminal justice system.
Thank you. And it's now time for our closing remarks. As I mentioned earlier, each of you will have 2 minutes. And Mr. Flaherty, we're going to start with you.
All right, thank you. Well, I thank you for coming tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And I would ask that you take some time to do research like this before you cast your vote. It's one of the most important rights that we have. This is a very important office. I would ask that you talk to a judge, talk to a police officer, talk to one of my staff, talk to a prosecutor if you have questions about my leadership ability. And look at the record. Look at the record that's verifiable. I've been here for 22 years with my wife. We raised our son here. Before that, I was down in Lincoln County as a prosecutor, and before that, I was a judicial clerk in Clackamas County, and you can verify everything that I've done. And you can look at the record of my office. How have we performed the constitutional functions of the district attorney's office, not what a politician believes that he might do if he's elected DA. You want to have an experienced prosecutor leading your DA's office. My opponent has no experience whatsoever. He's not going to be able to lead the 18 prosecutors in carrying out their function every day because he's never done it. You can't ask somebody to do that which you've never done. He's talking about a vision. Well, it's going to be interesting to hear the feedback, not only from my people, but from the sheriff, from the police agencies, from the Kids Center, who we work with very closely, and many, many others out there, the SANE nurses, all the veterans organizations, about his vision and how he's going to bring it about. We do have a vision. It's to continue to take care of you and serve you as we have over the last 3.5 years. That's what my office will do. Thank you.
Mr. Flaherty. And Mr. Hummel?
Thank you, Patrick, for joining me tonight, and thanks everyone for coming, and thank you to the league for hosting this event. This is important to understand. There's a difference between the two candidates here, and I think you just heard a bit of it here. My ears perked up. I don't know if my opponent was in the same room for this last hour, but he talked about me talking about my vision. I've not been talking about my vision. I've been talking about the community vision for public safety. When he hears vision, he thinks him or me, or it's one individual who has it. That's why he naturally went there. I think community vision. I've talked about bringing this community together to develop our vision for public safety. Drug and alcohol providers, mental health experts, elected officials, law enforcement officials, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, neighborhood associations. Let's come together as a community and develop our community vision for public safety. Let's set our priorities and let's go out and get it. Just like OSU Cascades had that twinkle in the eye and that ridiculous dream that everyone laughed at them for daring to think that we could have a 4-year university in this community. Well, we came together as a community with our vision. And you know what? We're gonna get it. So it's not my vision, heck no, it's our vision. That's why I'm running for this office, and that's what I want to bring. And an important part of that vision is respect for taxpayer dollars. Respect for taxpayer dollars. Over $1.5 million have been squandered because of mismanagement, and my opponent has said he will do it again. And if he loses lawsuits again, they would have been lying again, and so he'll do it again, yet again. The insanity has to end. It has to end. If I get in there, you know what's going to happen? We're going to develop our vision. I'm going to run the office right. I'm going to respect taxpayer dollars, and Deschutes County will remain the greatest place in the country to live and raise a family. I would be honored to represent you, and thanks for your consideration.
And that ends our forum. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank both of you very, very much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, we invite the audience to visit with the candidates after the broadcast or pick up literature in the hallway on your way out. The League of Women Voters would like to thank Channel 11 for coverage, KPOV 88.9.